Emergency alert. Do not look outside your windows. Emergency alert. Warning, this is not a test. I repeat, this is not a test. Citizens of the world, lock all doors. Close all blinds. Do not go near any windows. Do not look outside. Do not leave your house. Stay in a room with no windows. Gather what supplies you can. Turn off all the lights, and do not open the door for anyone or anything. When I first heard it, it didn't even sound real. The robotic voice, the suddenness, it felt like a bad dream, like something out of a horror movie. But it was an emergency alert, and I decided I should probably do what they were telling us. I grabbed a flashlight, a pillow, my phone and charger, some food, and a few other things to keep me occupied while this played out. I had no idea what was happening, but I followed the instructions and huddled in my bathroom, the only windowless room in my apartment. Once I was settled, I texted my parents to ask if they got the alert too. They did. They said, "Citizens of the world, did they actually broadcast this globally?" I wondered, half in disbelief. To make sure, I messaged an internet friend who lives on the other side of the planet. They replied, confirming they received the same exact message. The realization that this was worldwide hit me hard. The unknown is terrifying, and here we were, being told to hide from something, but we didn't even know what. 20 minutes later. Emergency alert. This is not a test. I repeat, this is not a test. Unknown creatures have been knocking on people's doors and killing those who open them. There are 5 major hotspots: Washington, D.C., Tokyo, Toronto, Moscow, and London. They've been reported in other areas as well, but these cities are under the most severe attack. This is an invasion. Stay in your rooms. Do not open any doors. Do not look outside. These creatures can kill you instantly with just a look. May God help us all. The emergency nuke sirens started blaring, along with the tornado sirens. This wasn't a prank, it was real. But how could it be? An invasion? Were we actually being attacked by aliens? My brain struggled to process the idea. I heard car alarms going off outside, the sounds of metal crunching, and glass shattering. Whatever these things were, they were here, and they were causing unimaginable destruction. I tried texting my parents again, but got no response. I tried my brother and sister, still nothing. Panic started to set in. What if they were gone? I was alone, trapped in this small room, listening to the chaos outside, powerless to do anything about it. I could hear the building being struck by something heavy, the structure groaning under the impact. My mind raced. What could we possibly do? The government was telling us to stay inside, but it felt like we were just sitting ducks, waiting for the inevitable. And then, as if to confirm my worst fears, I heard a knock on my door. My heart stopped. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Someone, or something, was on the other side, and it wasn't human. But then I heard a voice, a person's voice, pleading for me to let them in. It sounded so real, so desperate, but I couldn't take the risk. I stayed put, shaking, terrified that any moment the door would burst open and whatever was out there would come for me next. Emergency alert. This is not a test. I repeat, this is not a test. The extraterrestrials are attacking every major city in the world. There are countless of them. We have not determined their purpose. Stay inside. Millions, if not billions, are dead. Stay inside. The message repeated, less informative each time, as if the authorities had run out of things to say, or maybe even hope. If billions were dying, there was no way to survive this. The sounds outside had grown louder, metal tearing, glass shattering, distant screams. It was the end of the world, and all I could do was sit and wait for it to come to me. I imagined what these creatures looked like, but every time I tried to picture them, all I could see was my own death. What did they want? Why were they here? And why were they killing us? It was too much to bear. I started thinking about suicide, about ending it on my own terms rather than letting those things get to me. I didn't want to die, but what kind of life was this? Surviving only to hear the world end outside your door? My mind was racing, spiraling, but before I could make a decision, another alert came through. Emergency alert. This is not a test. I repeat, this is not a test. The extraterrestrials have left, leaving billions dead in their wake. If you are alive, please tap the button on your phone now. If you are on a radio, tune to 104 and state your name and city. We will update you in 20 minutes. They were gone. I was still alive, but at what cost? The world outside my bathroom was a mystery. How many had survived? What was left of our cities? What was left of our lives? I didn't want to live in a world where everyone I knew was dead, but there was also a part of me that didn't want to die now that I had a chance to survive. I sent texts to everyone I knew, waiting anxiously for replies that didn't come. Eventually, I got responses from only 3 people, my sister, my uncle, and my best friend. Everyone else was gone. My heart broke all over again. I wanted to give up, to join the billions who had perished, but then I thought about what was left of humanity. We needed each other now more than ever. The survivors had to rebuild, to try to piece together some semblance of a future. But I didn't know if I had the strength to be part of that. Emergency alert. This is not a test, I repeat, this is not a test. We have accounted for a little over 1 billion survivors globally. Not every country has the technology to report, so we will investigate those areas in the coming months. We do not know what the creatures wanted, nor what they may have taken. In the next months, we will determine humanity's next steps. May God help us all. Just over 1 billion people left. That meant more than 6 billion were dead. The weight of that number was crushing. I thought about my family, my friends, and everyone who didn't make it. Guilt gnawed at me. Why was I still alive when so many others weren't? The thought of rebuilding felt impossible, like trying to swim against a tide that was too strong. I wasn't sure if I could do it, if I even wanted to. 2 weeks later, the guilt was too much. Every day was a struggle to stay alive, to keep going when there was nothing left to fight for. I was a coward, too scared to face what came next. I had nothing left to give, no more strength to push forward. Goodbye. My brother didn't leave his room for 3 days. My parents wouldn't let me check on him. On the 3rd night Jacob didn't come out of his room, I got the courage to bring it up to Mom. People don't sleep for this long, I said. She was cooking a casserole, the 6th one this week. We were running out of fridge space for the leftovers, but she kept making more. I would watch her from the corner of the kitchen, her posture curved and her newly grayed hair hanging over the food. I walked over and tugged at her sleeve, but she didn't respond. She was slathering butter on the top crust. Mom, I said. Did you hear me? He needs his strength, she said. We can't be bothering him. Before I could say anything, Dad walked in. His eyes were red and swollen, but he was smiling. He had 3 cans of Coke in his hands. I'm starving, he said. I still have the taste of that horrible cafeteria food in my mouth. You would think hospitals had good food for how much money they make, Mom said. I know, right? Dad said. He placed the Cokes on the counter. Mom didn't want us to go near Jacob's room, but I was getting worried. I peered out from the kitchen. His room hung at the end of the hallway like an abandoned lighthouse, the only sign of life being the New York Yankees poster taped to his door. Near the ground, there was a small sliver of space to see if he had turned on his lights. It was still dark, as it had been for the last 3 days. I turned back to Mom. Shouldn't we check on him? I asked. I don't know why places like Wendy's or Burger King don't put up little shops in hospital, Dad went on. I mean, you have hundreds of people who are stuck there for days on end. That's consistent business. It's all politics, Mom said. They sign these big contracts that are impossible to break. Right. That makes sense. Right. Dad was standing next to Mom now, his face inches from the casserole. He took a long sniff. Ah, he said. Smells great. Do you want some of the leftovers while this finishes in the oven? She asked. I think we still have some from yesterday. Wasn't the spinach and ricotta one good? Very good. Very, very good, he said. I couldn't stop eating it. Jacob's gonna devour these when he gets the appetite, Mom said. I turned back and took a step into the hallway. The distance between me and his room felt long and narrow, like a high wire. When I got away from the casserole smell, I hit a different smell. It reminded me of old gym socks. Even with Mom's array of candles and incense, I still smelled it. It cut through everything. The last time I saw Jacob was on the drive home from his treatment. His face was a pale green and his eyes kept rolling back. Mom said I had to keep talking to him, to keep his focus. I told him about my friends from school and how they keep pranking the teacher by putting tacks on her chair. It wasn't true, I saw it on a TV show once, but I was running out of material. It didn't matter though. Jacob didn't even respond. All he did was cough. Pink drool was spilling onto his t-shirt. Danny, Mom said. Why don't you heat up some of those leftovers? We're all craving that spinach and ricotta casserole. I can't stop thinking about it, Dad said. I was dreaming about it last night. I ignored them. I kept my focus on my brother's door. I didn't dream about the casserole like Dad. I kept having a different dream. My brother was running into my room and flicking my ear. It was a game we used to play. We would tiptoe up to the other's door then wait for our moment. Then, the attacker ran in and got 1 or 2 good flicks before retreating. In my dream though, Jacob would run in and flick me, but I wouldn't move. I just stood there. He would flick and laugh, then flick some more. Sometimes, he would flick so hard my ear flew off. Earth to Danny, Dad said, snapping his fingers in my face. He was standing in front of me, blocking my view of Jacob's door. Do you mind heating up 4 portions of the casserole in case Jacob wants some? We're going to eat that before this next casserole because we want to make sure Jacob's able to try it because, in my opinion, it was definitely one of your mom's best. I looked up at him and held my eye contact. I couldn't say what I was thinking, so I wanted Dad to feel it. Maybe, if I stared long enough, my feelings would translate. But Dad looked at me for only a moment, then away. In that brief connection though, I saw something I didn't want to see. It was like staring down the tunnel of the world's deepest well. "Come on now," he said. He grabbed my shoulders and turned me around. His voice got heavier. "You're going to want to heat up each piece individually because if you do them all at once then you won't get even heat through the pieces and you'll probably have a couple that are too hot and others that are too cold and then Jacob won't get the full picture of how good these casseroles are." Dad let go of my shoulders and walked ahead of me, but I stayed in the hallway a moment longer. I turned to look at my brother's door one last time. I fantasized about walking up to it and going inside. But I was afraid Mom would yell at me. Besides, I never liked going in there. He had a puke bucket next to his bed which always had pink splatters in it, and there were always clumps of hair on his pillows. Back before the last hospital visit, Mom would make me go in there and talk to him, but I always made up some excuse, like I had a cold and didn't want to get him sick. When I couldn't get out of it, I would stay in there for a few minutes and watch him try to breathe. I would tell him about some TV episode one saw, then run back to my room. I looked up. I thought I was walking back to the kitchen, but I was moving toward the door. I didn't want to, but I kept moving, like my limbs were controlled by a puppeteer. I put my hand on the doorknob. I turned. The gym sock smell filled my head like helium. Through the darkness, I could make out a sliver of my brother's face. The soft evening light fell on him. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. His arms were straight as rulers and his fingers curled like a blooming rose. I walked aside of his bed. Red spit fell off his lips. He looked like a frowning clown. I flicked his ear. It was hard. I walked out and closed the door behind me. As I walked back, I seemed to forget what the inside of his room looked like. With the door closed, it could be anything. Jacob could be doing jumping jacks, or reading comic books, or plotting his next ear flick attack. When I walked into the kitchen, I heated up 4 plates of spinach and ricotta casserole. When they were done, I wrapped Jacob's plate in aluminum foil and put it in the oven to keep warm. Then, Mom, Dad, and I sat in the dining room and ate in silence.